Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to today's V2X webinar, a short dive into the evolution and future of vehicle connectivity. I'm Nicholas Ramphos, the Director of the National Operations Center of Excellence, or NOCO. This webinar is being recorded. A recording will be shared on our YouTube page, a newsletter, and will be available on the website within the coming week. To get the recording, just feel free to follow us on YouTube and register for our newsletter. All participants will be muted throughout the webinar, so please use the Q&A box on your Zoom toolbar for any questions for the presenters. For general questions for NOCO or anything else, please use the chat box, and we will be doing Q&A after each of the speakers. This webinar has closed captioning and transcription options as well. Access to those are also on your Zoom toolbar. Before we begin, I just want to thank all of you who are joining us for today's webinar. And the idea behind the webinar today is to help you learn more about the context and background of V2X and how vehicle connectivity has developed over time. The webinar will encompass trends, concepts, and milestones that have shaped connected vehicle technologies. You'll also learn about V2X and its influence on future approaches to vehicle connectivity and transportation systems. Just as a side, in 2025, NOCO hosted a V2X peer exchange at the Texas Transportation Institute's Rellis campus in Bryan, Texas. And the peer exchange allowed participants to share information between a cross-section of transportation agency professionals in research, TSMO, and ITS roles. NOCO has been coordinating resources for V2X technology since 2016, when it started focusing on the use of signal phase and timing, or SPAT, applications being deployed. The peer exchange that we held last year built on these past efforts and helped reinvigorate the national conversation on V2X technology. So for further information on the report from that peer exchange, you can either go to the NOCO website or click on the link that we'll be putting in the chat box here momentarily if it's not already there. So today we're going to hear from three speakers. Bobby McCurdy, who's the Vice President for Policy and Advocacy at ITS America. Then we'll be hearing from Justin Anderson and J.D. Schneeberger from the ITS JPO office at USDOT. And then Tom Gordon, who's the ITS CAV specialist with the Michigan DOT. And again, we will be doing Q&A after the presentation, so please feel free to type in your questions into the Q&A box so we can moderate any of those questions. So before I hand over the presentation, and we're going to start off with Bobby, but I'd like to introduce Maria Kuski, who's our Associate Program Manager for Safety at AASHTO. And she's going to say a few words about AASHTO's CAV Community of Practice, as well as today's webinar. Maria?
Yes, hello everyone. Thank you so much for attending. This has been long overdue. We've been trying to coordinate this to meet our members' needs. This was initially prompted by our CAV community of practice. Our members really wanted to see something that could help benefit them and kind of give them an idea of what is going on around the country. So I am very thankful you all decided to join us today. We have our CAV community of practice with about 94 members, and then we also have our SMAT working group, which has about 60 members. So I'd like to thank them all for helping us come up with the topics and putting this all together.
Okay, thanks, Maria. All right, I'm gonna turn things over to Bobby from ITS America.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Nick and team. Great to be with you today for a conversation on vehicle to everything technologies and where we see it over the course of the next couple of years, where it fits into modernizing our transportation system and changing the status quo for transportation safety and operations and efficiency. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Bobby McCurdy. Like Nick said, I'm the Vice President of Policy and Advocacy at the Intelligent Transportation Society of America, or ITS America for short. I see in the attendees list here a number of our members, so great to see you again. And sorry if anything you hear here is going to be repetitive. But for those of you who don't know us, we are a trade association that represents the public, private, nonprofit, and academic sectors in the pursuit of deploying transportation technology. We have members that are part of state DOTs, county DOTs, city DOTs, MPOs, technology companies, automakers, suppliers, engineering firms, research institutions, you name it. So it's a big tent of folks that are coming together around this subject of transportation technology. And it's not just to deploy transportation technology for technology's sake. The reason that we're doing this is because we believe that if we are going to change the status quo of deaths on American roads, which has been staying there near that 40,000 number, if we're going to be able to help significantly reduce congestion and save people time that they're spending stuck in traffic, and really help improve the economy that's bolstered by a functioning transportation system that is commensurate with the United States and our needs, that we need to be able to embrace technology. We're not going to be able to build our way out of it with concrete and asphalt alone, that we need a technology layer to really allow us to achieve what we know is possible with our transportation system. And that's what has us so excited about vehicle to everything technologies. We are looking at a wide portfolio of things that we think can make a big difference, really under the umbrella of digital infrastructure, automation, things like that that are relevant to this community of practice. But when it comes to vehicle to everything technologies, we believe that this is going to be a fundamental tool to be able to meaningfully make a difference in our safety outcomes. And this has been something that ITS America has been fighting for a very long time. Let me go to my first slide and we can start talking about some of the background that I've been asked to cover and talk about what we think it means over the course of this next decade for transportation. So vehicle to everything technologies are technologies that allow vehicles to wirelessly exchange information with the world around them in real time. Typically, it's broken down into three categories: vehicle to vehicle, vehicle to infrastructure, and vehicle to pedestrian, all of which fit under the umbrella of vehicle to everything technologies. And so for those of you who might have heard of V2X before, you might have started thinking about it from a vehicle to vehicle perspective. Like if my car is 6 cars ahead of yours in traffic and my airbag goes off, I get into a crash, my car can alert your car that that took place so you can take preventative action from getting into a secondary crash. That is a basic, very helpful V2X use case that's very important as part of the ecosystem of applications that are being supported by V2X practitioners. There's a number of other ways in which V technologies can really help be able to improve driver awareness of risks around them and driver perception of things that are out of their line of sight so that they can take action to avoid crashes and to have better transportation safety outcomes. There is also vehicle to infrastructure technologies. These are things that perhaps your infrastructure can send you a traffic signal, can alert you that you are about to run a red light, or that somebody that is going through the intersection is about to run the red light of the light that you're about to go through yourself. It can alert a driver to a pedestrian that is in a crosswalk that they might not be seeing when they're about to be making that turn. There's a huge number of ways in which vehicle to infrastructure technologies are poised to be able to significantly provide better safety outcomes as well. Of course, vehicle to pedestrian technologies. There's been a lot of focus on getting devices in the hands of pedestrians, whether it be through their smartphones or cyclists through devices, standalone devices on their bicycle or their smartphones themselves, to be able to have real-time alerts to drivers that these cyclists or these pedestrians are in the line of traffic or direction that this car is going to be going in. So these are all applications that fit under the umbrella of vehicle to everything communications. And this is something that, like I said, ITS America is extremely passionate about because we believe in conjunction with our partners at the Department of Transportation that this has a significantly meaningful ability to be able to reduce crashes on American roads. This is something that NHTSA has been looking into for a while. Our friends at FHWA have been spending a lot of time. You'll be able to hear from them in ITS JPO shortly after this. But this is, for us, it's also somewhat personal because we were the organization that asked the FCC to dedicate spectrum for this subject back 30 years ago within the 5.9 gigahertz band. And the reason that a number of V2X applications utilize dedicated spectrum is because we want to make sure that we're avoiding interference and latency. This is something that if we're trying to prevent a crash, if, like I said, my airbag goes off and your car's behind me, you need to make sure that that message gets to you instantaneously, without delay, and without the ability of being lost with additional airwave traffic. And so that's why historically, V2X practitioners have been looking at the 5.9 gigahertz band as that sort of information highway to get messages from vehicles and infrastructures and pedestrian into drivers' line of sight, or with audio messages within their car. So this is something that has historically been the view, but also there's an emerging space with the transmission of V2X messages outside of the 5.9 gigahertz spectrum, which is called networked V2X. ITS America has working groups that are looking at that 5.9 and outside 5.9, what we call beyond 5.9, because there really is a sort of number of use cases that would work with more higher latency aspects of sort of driver alerting, in terms of that you're having a work zone coming up, or that there is a ambulance a mile behind you, things that don't need to be going through at a tenth of a second, but things that are still important for us to be able to get information to drivers about. So these, I think, are both important areas of focus for this community of practice and for the broader transportation community as we look to leverage this important tool and safety tool primarily, but also has many other applications as well. I will just say that there have been a number of developments in the last couple of years that are exciting for the V2X space. There's been historically a fair amount of regulatory uncertainty when it comes to the Federal Communications Commission and their activity around the dedicated spectrum that we had in the 5.9 gigahertz band. Right now, we have a 30 megahertz designation, and that's something that they had released final rules on for CV2X technologies to be able to operate within that 30 megahertz. There are still some outstanding questions related to interference from adjacent spectrum, like the 6 gigahertz band, and what it means for the 45 megahertz they just gave away in the 5.9 gigahertz band, what sort of interference questions we have from that. But the final rules from the FCC on the 30 megahertz provide significantly more clarity than there has been in the last 5 or 6 years that I've been at ITS America working on this subject. There's also been a continued drumbeat from safety practitioners over this period that we need to have additional focus from our federal policymakers in Congress and our friends at DOT, who are working very hard on this around V2X deployment and encouraging these devices to get included in more personal vehicles, in fleets, and on infrastructure. And there's been a significant amount of funding being doled out through things like the SMART grant program, the ATTAIN grant program, Safe Streets and Roads for All, and most specifically the V2X Accelerator grant program, which was three $20 million projects that are really landmark V2X application examples. I see we have one of the leaders of that here on the call, Bob Bridey. This is something that we are extremely excited to be working with, and is a great example of what can be accomplished with federal support for these technologies. I just want you'll be hearing more about these in the next presentation, so I will just go quickly through this. That V2X is continuing to be deployed throughout the country, and that we really are looking at, from our perspective, ITS America wants to see how we can get more OEM inclusion of V2X in new vehicles, perhaps by incentivizing it as some sort of if equipped standard, or giving people bonus points in their new car assessment program 5-star safety rating. I think that that's a low-hanging fruit that we can really utilize to be able to help encourage automaker participation. And that, like I said, the V2X Accelerator Grant Program was a great example of how dedicated funding for V2X is going to be able to help move the needle on these things and be able to help us achieve the safety vision that we know that V2X can provide. But we need more dedicated funding for technology writ large under which V2X would fit. And that is because we have this big opportunity in surface transportation reauthorization. Every 5 years, there is a significant amount of time spent in Congress focused on what is our transportation vision and spending plan for the next 5-year period, next half a decade. And ITS America's priorities each relate to how we can support V2X and the broader transportation technology ecosystem through integrating these things into existing transportation programs by providing certain and substantial funding through formula programs for technology and by modernizing the procurement process through things like outcomes-based procurement so that we can make sure that there's less project delays and red tape that technology has to jump through to be able to be deployed on American roads. And I will just say that the reason that we believe this is so important is that if you look at the funding availability through the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, 1/10 of 1% of that money for transportation infrastructure was dedicated for technology. That is a insufficient amount when we look at the role of transportation technology in our transportation system, and that it undermines a national vision for these technologies as we look to be able to truly modernize our transportation system. That's why we believe it is critical that we get formula funding that states can rely on year after year to ensure that method and pace of investment continues to be able to keep us competitive in this space in the international stage. And that this funding is not something that folks have to be concerned about on an annual basis, that they can do long-term planning for how these projects can be implemented and how technology can be integrated into their transportation system. I will say that this community practice is an excellent place to be having these conversations. If you are interested in getting involved on ITS America's space, where we have a number of participants from the public, private sector, and academic, as I said, please come and check out our V2X and Connected Transportation Standing Advisory Committee. Like I said, we have 2 working groups under that are focused on different elements of the V2X ecosystem, the Beyond 5.9 working group and the Future of 5.9 working group, each looking in the spectrum and outside the spectrum on things like interoperability, on policy needs, on a regulatory landscape that's going to be able to help enable both of those ecosystems to work together to be able to deliver that next generation of transportation growth for the American public. And of course, there's a variety of other committees that we'd welcome as well. But with that, I will conclude. I think I'm hitting my time here, but look forward to answering any additional questions after we've heard some more detail as to how ITS-JPO and some state DOTs are looking at particular applications. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks, Bobby. 2 questions for you. One is when it comes to safety and V2X, what is, in your estimation, what is the top challenge that a lot of implementation agencies are facing or they need to be concerned with?
Historically, when people think about a challenge when it comes to V2X deployment, it's the chicken and egg issue when it comes to vehicle integration and infrastructure integration. And the thing is, when we look at it from the vehicle side, the situation is perhaps more apparent when you consider things like automatic emergency braking. If I put that in my car by myself, that's going to be able to help prevent a secondary crash. Vehicle to everything communications requires there to be some sort of message exchange between the vehicle and an infrastructure that's equipped with a roadside unit or another vehicle that has an onboard unit to be able to communicate with. And so what we need is to be able to have some sort of concerted vision for how we're going to be adopting this, both from an infrastructure and a vehicle perspective. And I know that USDOT has been working very hard on that and has had a number of great ideas on this over the years. And so we are going to continue to support them as they work to ensure that the deployment rate in these 2 critical elements of V2X is aligned with their deployment goals.
Okay, and you alluded to this in your presentation regarding the OEM. So what do you think it's going to take to get them to the table?
I think that there's been a significant amount of conversation about this, and I think that it's something that is probably the most important point when it comes to V2X deployment. We think that the new car assessment program is a helpful way to provide a carrot for automakers to be incentivized to include these in vehicles. They also want to make sure that they can trust and have standards for the information that's entering their vehicles from third-party sources. And so I know that that's something that DOT is working on, that our community is working on. And so I think that additional standards around that is going to be a helpful element of providing that trust and certainty from an automaker perspective. But it really, at the end of the day, if you're an automaker and you're considering putting a V2X device in your car, you can understand on one hand the tremendous safety benefit that this is going to provide, and on the other hand, you need to make sure you have the regulatory certainty to be able to move forward with that. And so I think that the recent activity from the FCC to be able to solidify the rules for the 30 megahertz and the incredible amount of work that's being done by the team at USDOT, ITS-JPO, FHWA just continues to increase the drumbeat of that regulatory certainty and create a regulatory landscape that is amenable to OEM deployment.
Great. All right. Thanks so much, Poppy. Appreciate all the information.
Thanks. It was great
Okay.
being here.
Yep. Okay. We're going to move over to Justin and JD. It's all yours.
Thank you. Justin Anderson. I work at the ITS Joint Program Office, and I lead the V2X and cybersecurity programs at the ITS JPO. So today we're going to talk to you a little bit about V2X. I'll do the upfront section, sort of where we've been and where we are today, and then JD will talk about some of the cool efforts that we're trying to do to capture sort of where we are and where we're going deployment wise, and also sort of like a lot of the different tools and efforts that we have that can help support the state and local agencies that are out there trying to do V2X communications. So standard disclaimer. I wish I could start my video. Unfortunately, my camera is not working, so you'll just see a black screen. But our standard disclaimer that we're not anything that we say in here is mainly for informational value. And if you see products or manufacturers named, it's just because they were essential to the purpose. We're not endorsing or promoting anybody's products or services. Again, this is meant to be a more of an informational session for everyone. All right, so what is V2X? This is the definition that we've come up with. I'm not going to read it to you, but I will key in on a couple of the important aspects of this. Trusted one is one, and Bobby already kind of hit on it with, OEMs need to trust this data for liability reasons, right? If they're warning drivers on safety issues. So trust is critical to the performance of the system, and then timeliness, right? And we'll get into that when we start talking a little bit about network and direct V2X, and that's where really I think the timeliness comes in, and what use cases may be more appropriate for one technology over the other. And one thing that we did not formally put in the definition here, but that we do talk a lot about as well, is interoperability, right? The ability to use this communications across different vendors, but potentially across network and direct V2X. We've been doing some work with that. So all critical aspects of V2X, but by and large, V2X is wireless communications between vehicles, infrastructure, pedestrians, and others. And that's really what we want to sort of hammer home, is that this is not just V2V. V2X can improve vehicle safety. It can improve pedestrian safety. We've seen over the last 2 years, I would say, a plethora of more advanced systems at intersections like LiDAR, like camera systems that can detect pedestrians and then broadcast messages that show where those pedestrians are, that V2X vehicles can then use to tell if a pedestrian is near, if a pedestrian is in a crosswalk, that type of information. Work zone safety, obviously, again, we have seen a lot of V2X device vendors in recent times creating more pedestrian-focused devices. There's a couple vendors that have a V2X radio that's about the size of a deck of cards. So now pedestrians and putting these types of radios on work zone workers, so that there's awareness about where they are in the work zone, not just that there is a pedestrian in the work zone, I think are another important safety improvement that V2X can bring to work zones. And then mobility and incident response. Again, what we're really seeing is a lot of momentum around incident response, especially around like emergency vehicle response and automated vehicles, right? And we really think, V2X is a big part of that, right? Being able to tell these automated vehicles, hey, there's been an emergency response incident here. Please stay away from this area. Just don't even come near it. I think is an important thing, and V2X would be the way that you could get there, right? There are a lot of really great efforts going on across the country, looking at these different aspects and really trying to take advantage of some of the really key benefits of V2X. So what are some examples, right? V2V, primarily is the basic safety message, right? It's every vehicle creates one time every 10 times every second. It gives you your basic location, heading, speed, braking status, that kind of information. And then the other vehicles use that to make decisions on whether they might collide with that vehicle or have to take an action. Vehicle to pedestrian, again, there's a pedestrian safety message. Again, very similar to basic safety message, just made for pedestrians. Vehicle to infrastructure, signal phase and timing, map, intersection maps, and then the priority and preemption type scenarios that are enabled through signal requests and signal status messages. Those are ones that we see from, infrastructure owner operators. Some of the most near-term benefits that they get. Utah equipped their snowplows with preemption, and it cut their plowing times in half. Right. We've seen transit systems implement transit signal priority and improve on time for schedules for buses and things like that. So again, a great a great benefit of V2X and specifically V2I. And if you're using sort of the traditional V2X, what we'll call the SAE 2735, that dictionary that defines all the V2X messages, then you are interoperable, right? And that's sort of the power of using a lot of these applications and using these defined message sets, is that interoperability between vendors and even between network and direct V2X in some cases. And then other examples of vehicle to infrastructure are your traveler informations, right? Like your work zone warnings, weather warnings, curve speed warnings. There's lots of incident warnings, things like that, where you're getting information out to folks ahead of time so that they can potentially change their path to where they're going, right? If they're going to intersect something, if they're going to hit weather, or if they're going to hit a huge traffic queue, things like that. These advanced messages can help the efficiency and flow, routing folks down different avenues. So the history of V2X, as Bobby pointed out, in October 1999, the FCC allocated that 75 megahertz of spectrum for ITS. And then in October 2004, they released the rules for how to use that spectrum. And those were focused on dedicated short-range communications. In November 2020, the first report and order for 5.9 gigahertz was released, which was when we formally were reduced to 30 megahertz of spectrum, and the technology was transitioned from dedicated short-range communications to LTE V2X. And so, although I know most folks know of LTE as cellular, in this case, the LTE V2X is a direct connection technology. You talk device to device. You don't have to hit a base station. So it is very much analogous to DSRC and performs very close to DSRC's performance. And then in November of 2024, we got the second report and order where we finalized the rules for LTE V2X usage. And that's really where we got that regulatory certainty that Bobby was talking about, was, that second report and order laid out the rules, and we're actually for the out-of-band emissions, those 6 gigahertz in the what's also called the Uni4, which is the spectrum below us, we've done a lot of research, and we're comfortable with where the rules are at today, that our spectrum is protected. We have prioritization in the band above us, so those frequencies actually have to prioritize using frequencies above 6.105 gigahertz. So that's plenty of room for us. And then below us, the 45 megahertz is not allowed for outdoor usage, which was our main concern. And so those two aspects of the second report and order really, I think, for us, make it that this is a really protected band now, that we're not at all concerned about out-of-band emissions creeping into our band, and that this should be the final ruling. We're not expecting any more rulings on 5.9 gigahertz from here on out. So the story that we're telling is we're good to go. Folks can safely deploy now, and we're not going to be changing technologies anytime soon. Major DOT funded projects and pilots. We had the safety pilot in 2012. We started the connected vehicle pilots in 2015, and they went through 2018, 2019 timeframe. And then in 2024, we started the 3 V2X accelerator grants, Connecting the West, which is a collaboration between Utah as the lead and Colorado and Wyoming. We have Maricopa County in the Phoenix area in Arizona, and then Texas A&M Transportation Institute, which covers locations in both College Station and Houston. And so those grants have kicked off. They are full speed ahead. We're actually going to be exiting phase 2 exiting phase one and entering phase two here later this year. So it's an exciting time, and we'll have a lot more to talk about with the V2X accelerated grants as the year goes by. And then there's various discretionary grants programs that can be used for V2X type funding, SMART, Attain, ATC, MTD. A lot of these programs have funded a number of V2X projects, and we encourage folks to use those programs for V2X. So now I do want to talk a little bit about direct V2X and network V2X. So the reason we came up with them is because of how the technologies work, right? Direct V2X is a point-to-point technology. Two vehicles are talking directly to each other, or can talk directly to a roadside unit. And so it's fast, low latency. Communications is very reliable, especially within the 300-meter range, which was originally specified as like the main operating range. Generally, actually, you'll get about 1,000 meters of range on a direct communications link. But it's highly reliable, very low latency, and so it's really the technology that we encourage for the safety use cases, like the critical safety warnings, like an intersection movement assist, a left turn assist, forward collision warning, emergency electronic brake light, those types of applications. Direct V2X is the technology that we feel is low latency and reliable enough to safely to do those use cases. And then we have network V2X, and we call it network V2X because your vehicle is not talking directly to another vehicle. It's connecting to a network, and then that's going to either another vehicle or a cloud service or an infrastructure device. And so that network that sits between the two endpoints can add a little bit of latency. It can also add some unreliability, right? I'm sure everybody has noticed on cellular performance is not always uniform throughout the day, right? There are certain days where networks become more congested and performance degrades a little bit. It's the same thing with network V2X. We primarily talk about cellular service as the main network V2X, and that's what we see with a lot of folks playing around with. But we do know that there are groups that are playing around with unlicensed Wi-Fi, which would be another example of a network V2X technology, because you're connecting to that Wi-Fi router and then getting connected to somebody else. But again, very much in the research phase for some groups. In the main network V2X technology we've seen so far is cellular. Roadside unit deployments today. This is the number, and this comes directly from the Federal Communications Commission's Universal Licensing Database. So when you deploy a roadside unit, you have to get a license for that unit. It's a fairly straightforward process. There's a place on the FCC's website. You submit your information. It'll include sort of the lat long mounting height information that they use to determine, that this radio is going to be able to operate safely within the rules that the FCC has set. And so pulling directly from that, we have 9,132 RSUs installed across the country. Now, this does include DSRC RSUs still. DSRC is allowed to continue to operate until December of this year. So we're going to expect the DSRC RSUs to still be resident in there. We do know a lot of the folks that have those DSRC RSUs, like Georgia, they still have a number of DSRC RSUs up. They're in the plans. They're actually replacing a lot of those with the LTE V2X. And so we're expecting some of those numbers to go down, but we are expecting numbers to go up quite a bit, especially in Texas, and in Arizona. Those numbers, and you'll see that in a couple slides, those numbers should get a lot bigger. And so we're expecting this number to continue to go up over time. But this is a real world snapshot of what is licensed with the FCC today. As I mentioned, we are working, and JD will be able to tell you more about this. We are working on capturing sort of what are planned deployments. And so the Maricopa County V2X Accelerator, this is their plan. They're going to be installing 750 roadside units throughout that area. You can see that's a lot of RSUs. And so over the course of this year, they're going to get those out and installed and up and running. And so JD will be able to tell you a little bit about some of the programs he's setting up to track this sort of detailed information. And then, the other thing that we wanted to talk about is we are trying to figure out how to capture network V2X usage across the country. But as you can see here, what we've found, and my program has done a lot of testing with network V2X resources, is it actually works pretty much wherever there is cellular coverage. And so anywhere you've got a cell signal, you can make the LTE, the network V2X services work. But all of the infrastructure, all of the other participants need to be using that same network V2X service to make it all happen. And so that's sort of what we're trying to figure out, right? Things like Haas Alert, right, where there's a lot of different, there are, theoretically, any Stellantis vehicle can get a Haas alert in it. However, you only get that if the fire truck or ambulance or emergency vehicle has signed up with the Haas Alert service. So those are the types of sort of nuances that we're trying to capture. But we do plan on trying to track a network V2X deployments across the country as well. And then here, last slide on my side before I hand it over to my colleague JD, just showing the sort of the different types of usage of technologies, right? So you'll see here, direct V2X, again, talking directly between participants. It's the green lines here, right? So you can see the V2I, the V2P, V2V, all devices talking directly to each other. And then, with the network V2X, you'll see, the vehicle's talking to a cellular base station, and then the base station is routing that communications through the cellular network to this end user here. And so this is sort of a picture of all of those different technologies working together. And then obviously, these backhaul systems can connect the roadside units, the direct V2X, with the network V2X, and sort of we're seeing more and more folks, starting to integrate both sources of data into their systems. And like I said at the beginning, there's better use cases. There are use cases that I think are more optimized for each technology, and we're starting to see more and more folks sort of play around with that and figure out what are the optional sort of the technologies to use for certain use cases. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to my colleague JD and let him take over from here.
Yeah, awesome, Justin. Thanks for that background, and Bobby, thanks for your introduction and background and overview of V2X. I thought it was amazing. One of the things I just wanted to focus on, right, is the fact that the question comes up: who is deploying V2X? Where is it happening? And one of the things we've been trying to do over at the US DOT is really try to document where VDEX is happening across the country. And as you kind of can see on this map, we're seeing a lot of momentum in accelerating VDEX. It's happening a variety of places across the country. Bobby, I think you had mentioned 40 states. We've tracked, at least 37 states who have active V2X projects using either direct V2X or network V2X. Likely we're missing some. So, we'll share this link with you afterwards, but if there are any other deployments that we may be missing, feel free to let me know. We'll be sure to add them to the map. But we are, trying to collect this information, really show the breadth of the deployments across the country. These range from a variety of direct V2X deployments that Justin's been talking about. We're also seeing a lot of interest in the network V2X opportunities, and many people dabbling in trying to advance both of those. What you'll see is a lot of these projects have been advanced using a variety of different funding sources, including discretionary grants, formula funding, and many states or agencies or local entities are actually using some of their own state or local funding to advance some of the deployments. On the federal side, a lot of these have been advanced through things like ATC MTD, which is now, Attain, the Smart Grant Program, Safe Streets for All. There are actually just 4 awards through the Safe Streets for All grants who are advancing V2X. And yes, you can use SS4A to advance V2X. And then folks have mentioned the dedicated funding through some of our ITS JPO programs, including the Connected Vehicle Pilots back in 2015-ish timeframe, and more recently, kind of the flagship programs that we're advancing with the V2X accelerator sites that are out there. If you'd like to download this map, I know we had it at TRB, we had it at ITS World Congress not too long ago. There was a lot of interest in that. We were finally able to make it available online. You can, visit that URL and access the map, and you should be able to download it and print it for your own reference. Again, if there are any deployments that you know that are going on across the country, we'd love to collect more information. We're going to be going and executing a more robust program to just try to get input and crowdsource some more information on this. But we want to make this available. There's been a lot of interest from not only state DOTs and IOOs, but from industry of really trying to understand some of this information. The other aspect of this is we realize that there's limited things you can share on a static map. So we are actually turning this into a GIS-based map that we are hoping to release very soon. So instead of just seeing dots on map, you'll be able to click on some of the projects, get a little bit more information about that. And then what Justin was showing earlier with the RSU deployments across the country, once things get into the ULS, we're actually able to populate and show the RSU deployments across the country. I will say there's a lot of interest from the vendor community, from the automotive industry of understanding what's coming next. So we've started trying to get more information about the planned deployments, what's in the pipeline. And just recently been working with our V2X accelerator sites to kind of showcase some of that. I think you saw one of the examples that was over there in Maricopa County. They're pretty much going to have RSUs in a vast majority of downtown Phoenix. And we know there's a lot going on in Texas as well as there is in Utah and some of the sites that are involved in the Connecting the West project. One of the things that I did want to just highlight, Justin, if you go to the next slide, is give some acknowledgement to our 3 V2X accelerator sites. Again, these are kind of our flagship grant programs that we at the ITS-JPO and FHWA are helping to advance. 3 amazing sites that you can kind of see here. In fall of 2024, we awarded cooperative agreements collectively worth $60 million to these 3 sites that you can kind of see on this slide. And the intent was to really kind of scale deployments. We moved beyond pilots. These are deployments of the technology, and all these had a really 3 sites had a great foundation for doing that. A key thing, in addition to scaling deployments, is to also really focus on interoperability, and that's really a key theme. Not only interoperability within their deployments, but interoperability across sites. So, technology that's working in Maricopa County needs to work seamlessly with Utah and TTI and across the way. So we're really excited. There's a lot of great information that's coming out from them. Justin mentioned they're kind of in the phase 1 of the program, moving into phase 2. They've done a lot of the planning and upfront work. Now they've already started deploying a lot of the equipment. They'll be testing it and then becoming operational in the near future. So just a quick overview. And I know we have some folks on the call from some of the sites. They can probably provide a lot more information than I can. But the TTI, project is really addressing safety and mobility challenges. Big focus on pedestrians, transit and emergency vehicles, construction, special event traffic. And they're using this to kind of support, also using V2X to support things like flooding scenarios or use cases and hurricane evacuation. So really great things that are going on in Texas. Maricopa County's focuses on improving VRU, or vulnerable road user safety, as well as efficiency of transit, emergency, and freight vehicles. So a lot going on there with signal priority, signal preemption, as well as some of the other sites. And then the Utah DOT is actually spearheading. You see there, it's not just the state of Utah, but it's actually 3 states. That deployment actually encompasses Utah, Colorado, and Wyoming, who've had some great foundations in V2X. And their focus is really on intersections, work zones, and doing a lot of work, especially in Wyoming and some of the other corridors with rural safety and kind of building on the CV pilot that was done by Wyoming DOT a number of years ago. So I just would encourage you to stay on the lookout. I know they're preparing a lot of documentation. They'll be making that, and we'll be helping them make that available. There's a lot of webinars that are going to be coming in the future where they'll be sharing some of their best practices and lessons learned. So really good stuff showing, how this stuff is moving forward. Justin, if you go to the next slide, I just have an overview of some of the applications that the 3 different V2X accelerator sites are advancing. I won't go over all these details, but based on what Justin was saying earlier, there's a lot of focus on signalized intersections. We're seeing a lot with signal priority, preemption, not only for buses, not only for freight vehicles, but also things like snowplows. And this is all being done in an interoperable way, leveraging the standards to kind of advance these solutions. One of the things you will notice here is really, and I think the exciting thing is really that these three sites are advancing not only direct V2X, using the 5.9 safety band, but also leveraging network V2X as well, and doing this in combination. So you can see specifically, McDOT is doing a lot of that, and some really innovative things that are going on with TTI, where a lot of their use cases, they're really doing this hand in hand, side by side with those two different technologies. So really showcasing that interoperability kind of all the way across the board. If you go to the next slide, Justin, we are looking kind of across the way and seeing where there are synergies. There are a variety of kind of use cases. This is just an initial starting point of that. Where all three sites are advancing. Again, you'll see the signal priority and preemption use cases, a lot going on vulnerable road user safety, and using advanced messages like the sensor data sharing message, leveraging things like LiDAR, which is going to be really fascinating. But the real hope is that eventually to get the sites together and showcase interoperability and, looking at these use cases where there are synergies kind of across the board, because the real vision is for this stuff to work seamlessly across the country and not be silo deployments. So stay tuned for a lot of that information. Justin, if you go to the next slide. One of the things I just really want to emphasize, and there's some discussions about OEMs a little bit earlier, there's just a few examples of things that we are aware of, and I think there's a lot more that are out there too, is really the OEMs are, at the table, and they're really excited for this as well. Two V2X Accelera sites will include OEMs, OEM vehicles with fully integrated LTE V2X radios, not aftermarket stuff, but fully integrated LTE V2X radios. So the Connecting the West has a partnership, and they're going to be working with GM, a GM vehicle, and TTI is working with GM and Audi vehicle. And I know they're making some great progress there, and it's just really great to see the OEMs at the table and kind of showcasing really kind of the next generation state-of-the-art technologies that they're really ready to build into some of these vehicles moving forward. And then we know from the recent Safe Streets for All grant that Contra Costa Transportation Authority just received, they're including multiple OEMs and actually an automated vehicle in some of their V2X use cases moving forward. You can see the list here, Nissan, Toyota, GM, Audi, and Zoox are all partnering with them. So again, it's just really great to see kind of the OEM industry, the automation industry, working collaboratively with a lot of these deployers. I'm sure there's a lot of other scenarios and deployments across the country doing similar type of things, but these are just kind of two that we just wanted to make sure some folks were aware of and show you some examples. Justin, if you go to the next slide, I did want to just emphasize just a few things that are out there. We are trying to do our best over at the DOT as well as others, so just kind of pulling together information and resources. One thing, a couple of weeks ago, we were able to relaunch our Smart Community Resource Center, which is a hub for information. We're really just trying to collect various different documents. One of the things I've recognized over my course of my career and my role, being over at the US DOT is there's great information, but a lot of times that information is in 10 different places. And it's really hard to kind of identify, what the best information and kind of have it in one-stop shop. So we pulled a lot of good V2X resources together, and we have actually a V2X resource page that includes a variety of different documents. Information. Justin was talking about the FCC licensing process. We have that map that we talked about for V2X deployment, and a variety of other things that we hope will be available and useful to you as you kind of deploy. There's also a JPO V2X page. The National ITS Architecture is doing a lot of work. Certainly would reference that, and maybe I'll share my screen in a bit to showcase some of these things. And then we're also showing our ITS deployment evaluations. We're collecting benefits data. We're making that available really for the business case for folks to understand, the benefits that we are seeing for V2X, and we've got some good tools there. Recently, and I didn't get a chance to update this because things just got approved, but we're also developing a lot of technical resources, fact sheets, technical primers out there. We have one on V2X funding that will be available very soon. An explainer on direct and network V2X. There are a lot of questions in that space. We've done a lot of work of understanding and trying to articulate the different components that go into V2X enabled intersection and the cost associated with that. See stuff on the licensing process. Justin's team's working on a lot of the TIM best practices, and we have some V2X standards briefs that we are hopeful will be helpful. There's also an equipment loan and help desk program that is led by some of our colleagues over at Turner Fairbank Highway Research Center. So folks who are interested in just getting involved and maybe touching, or maybe don't want to buy some of this equipment yet, want to test it out, or maybe some of the equipment for testing is just too expensive, doesn't make sense to buy. There's a great program where they will actually loan you the equipment, everything from RSUs to OBUs, packet sniffers, spectrum analyzers, and even small kind of cave in the box units that are built in basically V2X in a suitcase. So feel free to reach out to Justin or I for any information on that. We'll be sure to point you to some of those resources. In addition to some of the open source tools, tools that are out there to create map messages, things that are converting messages from different standards in V2X Hub, and kind of message handling kind of units that are out there, and all the other ways to visualize data. So very much a robust set of tools, technical assistance, materials that are out there. Also give a nod to, ITS America is on the call, has developed a lot of great materials. The V2X pooled fund study that is now being led by the Georgia Department of Transportation, formerly being led by the University of Virginia and VDOT. A lot of great information that's out there. Any questions, Justin and I are involved in a lot of those things. More than happy to kind of point you to some more information on that. And I think if you go to the next slide, Justin, I'll just kind of wrap things up. Two groups that Justin and I have actually formed through at the ITS Joint Program Office with a lot of support from our colleagues. One is the Accelerating V2X cohort. I think there's a few members of the cohort are on this call. We've grown out to 73 public agencies across the US, and we meet monthly to talk about best practices, lessons learned. We just had a call a couple of days ago, or actually yesterday, actually a couple of days ago, it was on Monday, where we brought in some of the SCMS providers, security credential management system providers, to give an overview of some of their capabilities and what's going on in that space. And then Justin leads an interoperability technical working group that meets weekly, that really get into a lot of the details, some of the standards, details about the messaging, and really nerd out on a lot of the things related to V2X. So if that's your cup of tea, I know they certainly welcome folks. That is open to anyone, private sector, public agencies, and so forth. The Accelerating V2X cohort, we're trying to limit to public agencies just so we can have a safe space for some conversations there. So I know we threw a lot at you, but what I want to do is just make sure you had Justin and my contact information, which I think is on the next slide, and point you to some of the websites. I'll also throw in the chat some URLs, because I realize some of those links you guys can't access that I showed on the earlier slide. But if you want to access like our SCRC, Smart Community Resource Center, or some of these other tools, I'll make sure they get into the chat. So appreciate the time, and I'm more than happy to answer any questions at the end, but I want to make sure we have enough time for the MDOT folks to present.
Okay, thanks, JD and Justin. Just a couple questions for you guys before we move on to the next speaker. One of the questions was, are you able to share a direct link to where you found the RSU map from the FCC?
Yeah,
And
and so
Justin, go ahead. Go
yeah,
ahead.
so yeah, what I'll do is I'll go to the ULS database. I'll put a link in there. But what I can also do, I think it was Josh, is I'll get you some. I'll get your contact information. I'll send you sort of the queries that we send that actually get the data. I will say that FCC's website is ancient by modern web design standards, so it's a little bit of a wonky to work with. And I can probably give you some we could give you some tips on how to actually find what you're looking for in the database. So I'll put the link in the chat, but I'll also try and get the details for you so you can actually use it.
Yeah, and we are working.
And
We're
then,
hoping that we'll make the map. So give me 1 second. So I'll just give you guys a preview that we're working through the process on. Oh, it doesn't like that, but here it is. It's over here on the side. Give me 1 second. I don't know why it's doing that. We are actually working on making that map available. Let me figure it out. I'll share with you later, but we are working to making that map publicly available, and you can access it. If you have any questions, just shoot me an email. I'm more than happy to give you a static version of it, or point you to the URL when I can.
Okay, and then the other question was on the resources. And JD, you said you're going to put some of those in the chat because some folks are just asking about that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll put the links in the chat for everybody. But again, if there's anything else you need, just let me know.
Okay, great. Uh, Thank you both. And we're going to move on to Tom.
So, yep, my name's Tom Gordon. I am the CAV specialist for the state of Michigan. Um, and I'd like to share a little bit with what, state of Michigan's doing. Very high level, we kind of started with the DSRC communications with a lot of pilot deployments, focusing mostly on red light violation warning, work zone warnings, road weather management, and pavement condition monitoring. And kind of where we look.
Tom,
Yep.
you may want to put it into the slideshow mode, right? Because you have it
Oh,
in
is it?
your, yeah.
Sorry. Can you see that now, Nick?
No, it's still in.
I don't know why it's doing that. Can you see the slides at least?
Yeah.
Can't figure out why Zoom is messing up with that. Okay. Well, I'll just do it like this, and if there's issues, I can share the slides after the presentation. So we're transitioning to more CV2X type technologies using a lot of cellular modems with roadside units and some onboard units. This can kind of be featured more in like the Connecting Mound project that was recently done, I believe, sometime last year. And we're really just working to bring our infrastructure up to date. And we're looking into very specific use cases for technologies that serve a purpose, kind of like how Bobby started out with. We don't want to just put technology out there and hardware out there to say we have hardware out in the field. We want to make sure that we're using the hardware and the technologies in ways that are going to be effective and help with safety. Ultimately, trying to bring that the fatalities and severe accident numbers down. So currently we have a few deployments. We use dynamic message boards or DMSs. They provide just driving information to the public based on weather condition, travel time, speed warnings, etc. Probably see these on the highway as you're driving, just to make sure if there is something coming up that you are notified. Not really directly to the vehicle, but it is still a vehicle to infrastructure type of technology. We're also working on rolling out our new connected vehicle advanced transportation management system. This will allow us to input our work zone data into the work zone data exchange, which can be shared directly with anybody that wants to ingest the data. This can go straight to your Google Map, your Waze, whatever mapping provider you use. This is really OEM dependent if it gets directly into the vehicle, as they like to have a little bit of control over what the infotainment and the mapping services actually provide. But we're working to get that data out there just so that people can actually see it and that they're notified if a work zone is going to be active while they're passing through. And right now, our second phase, we're going to be working to incorporate the RSUs and connected vehicle messaging so that we can send out transportation messages and pedestrian messages as we get this implemented. We're also working on our smart work zones. This is going to account for smart arrow boards, connected work vests, real-time queue warnings, all just to make sure that as drivers are out in the roads, if there is a work zone that is active, the drivers are notified, and this helps put the safety of the workers in the forefront of everything, so that we don't have any work zone related fatalities. We're also working with Haas Alerts. We have a pilot program of 100 total MDOT and state fleet vehicles. They're going to be outfit with the Haas transponder. Again, this system will report right to the Haas cloud. This is something that Stellantis vehicles have. I believe Volkswagen announced that they are also getting this data directly from Haas. This does also go to, your other mapping services such as Google, Apple Waze, etc. So we're looking forward to getting this up and running. Again, in the name of safety, trying to make sure that if there is an emergency vehicle out there working, that they are notifying the drivers and they can make arrangements. We also have a lot of ongoing research in the V2X space. A couple of these that I'll highlight here in a minute are the multimodal 3D perception and the V2X bridge strike system. These are two that I'm currently leading the MDOT activities for. We're partnering with University of Michigan and Umtree for the 3D perception. And this is a sensor fusion using camera and LiDAR. And the goal of this system and this research is to really highlight vulnerable road users and to alert drivers if there's going to be a potential collision based on what else is going on in the intersection. One big perk for this one is probably going to help to identify a lot of near miss collisions, and it'll help us to kind of rate our intersections differently. And maybe we would, re-engineer these or redesign these some other way in the future. But the long-term goal of this is to really just provide data to the drivers that will notify them if there is a collision that they are approaching. And the other one that I'm working on is a light-based directed V2X communication for bridge strike detection. This is one that is aimed at freight haulers or any other sort of large truck that has a backhoe, whatever, so that they can avoid a bridge strike or potential bridge strike if they are driving with a load that is too tall for the bridges that they're going to be passing under. This will help them to navigate off the highway and to enter at a part further down in the highway that's it's safe for them to enter and where they won't have that collision. We've been having a lot of bridge strikes lately, especially in the Grand Rapids, Allegan area. So this is one that, as we're starting, it's becoming more and more relevant with the ongoing bridge strikes that we've been seeing. So that's what I had at a high level, Nick. If there's any questions, I don't have the Zoom up on the other screen.
Okay. Thanks, Tom. Also, could you just spend a minute or two just to talk a little bit about what you do at MDOT?
Oh, yeah. So long story short, I've been at MDOT for about a year. I spent the last 15 years working in the automotive sector. I spent about 5 years at a tier one supplier, and I spent about 10 years at General Motors. I worked a little bit on the V2X side, working with active safety features and camera systems. But I spent the last year working as the CAV specialist, where I'm looking at all the forward thinking that we can do to try to implement and account for connected vehicles and ultimately for autonomous vehicles, whether it's trying to get green wave technologies to help mapping services or to provide just, we've got the CAVNU project going on the I-94 corridor, which we're looking at maybe making that more of it's going to be more of a connected vehicle and autonomous vehicle corridor. But really just looking at these technologies and trying to identify use cases and try to prepare the state for the upcoming connected and autonomous vehicles that are going to be built.
Okay, and I know you touched on some of this, but what are some of the statewide specific goals you guys have in mind for V2X right now?
So we're working on not rehabbing, but we're coming up with our V2X plan again. We're revisiting it to make sure that we are up to date with what the Federal Highway and ITS America and everybody are looking at. We're really focusing on more the Detroit area at this point, just with the sheer volume of vehicles and people. There's a lot more immediate impact there with what we've got going on, but really just trying to update our intersections with cellular modems. That way we can incorporate RSUs and not necessarily need to tear up a whole construction site and redo it just because we need to add a piece of hardware. So we're building in a fiber backbone throughout most of the state, which will help us connect our hardware as needed. We're also working to figure out where it makes more sense to have the cell modems. But yeah, we're really just trying to prepare, and I think we're having this will be a good time with the current administration and kind of the setbacks, not setbacks, but the rollbacks of a lot of the EV mandates. It'll give us a time to kind of regroup and see where it makes sense to spend the money on the infrastructure and the hardware, and make sure we have a good use case for the technologies that are being developed.
Okay, and then on the Haas transponders, you said that's a demo. How long is that demo going to go? And then what do you foresee as maybe victory on the demo to maybe expand it to other portions of the state?
Yeah, the pilot is going to be statewide. Like I said, the 100 vehicles, it's going to be some in the northern part of Michigan. A lot of vehicles in Detroit area. A lot of the fire departments are already using Haas alert transponders, not as part of this pilot, but kind of on their own. And as far as where it goes after the pilot, I believe the pilot's either 12 or 18 months. And from there, we'll kind of reevaluate and see if it's something we want to, pursue further. We'll have to look at the data that we get from Haas alert and see how many alerts were noticed, where maybe we put more hardware in and maybe we avoid rural areas. Just trying to make sure that we have the hardware and the technology in the right spot to really account for safety and notifying the public that there is something going on. So it kind of to be determined, I guess, Nick, but we're looking forward to see where the pilot takes us. And like all the other speakers have said, the more data and the more verified data, I guess, that we have out there that the public can absorb, the better for everybody's safety.
Great. All right. Well, thanks so much for all this great information. I do have some general questions for all the panelists, and whoever wants to could just jump in and ask and answer these. But so as agencies are looking to either start or expand a V2X program, what in your experience, what are some of the key aspects they should be considering with when it comes to implementation?
Well, I can give you some very specific technical examples, and it's one that we've seen in my program's been testing signal phase and timing, cross network, and direct V2X for a couple years now, and it's really like time sources of the different devices. Signal controllers can run on line sync time. RSUs generally use GPS time. Most other devices might use NTP, and all of these times can be slightly different than each other, and it really impacts if you're doing critical things with like a SPAT message. Knowing exactly when that's going to change is really important to the vehicles. It's one of the things that I've seen is a really tricky technical challenge is keeping that time synchronization between all of the devices is really sort of critical to effectively pulling this off. And so to me, that's something that's, I know most people probably don't go there with their first thoughts of what's the hardest, but it's deceptively difficult. But I will say that there are a lot of we did sort of foresee some of these issues, and there are a lot of things that can help these areas. What most people don't understand is that in the RSU standard itself, we put in a requirement that you can use an RSU as an NTP server, so you can clock everything off your RSU, and now everything has the same time. So, there are mechanisms in place, but it is complicated, right? Some folks don't control their networks. Some folks have, different protocols that they're allowed or not allowed. So it's a deceptively difficult one, but it's one that we've seen has a lot of impact on signal phase and timing based applications, priority, preemption, and just regular using SPAT for like red light violation warning.
Hey,
Okay.
Nick.
Great.
Nick,
Thanks.
can I
Yeah.
add one point? I'd
Go ahead,
say
Bobby.
also,
Yeah, go ahead.
oh, JD, if you want to go first, you're welcome to.
No, go ahead. I'll follow up with you.
Sure. Well, I would just say that I think it's important when you're considering a new V2X deployment from an IOO perspective is to identify a short-term audience for who is going to be this infrastructure is going to be able to immediately provide benefit to. I think there's a easy way to use when it comes to state or municipal controlled fleets are great sort of audiences to interact with the infrastructure that you're installing. Another one is we've seen a lot of focus on in terms of some of our practitioners has been school buses. That's something that I think that the public is able to recognize that this investment in these technologies are going to be able to be well received when it comes to protecting the lives of children going to and from school. And so that's a pre-existing group of vehicles that can interface with the infrastructure that you're creating for this V2X ecosystem. So I think that our long-term goal is to get everybody up to scale and get deployment of V2X in all vehicles. But in the short term, it's helpful to be able to have things that can demonstrate immediate benefit.
Okay, great.
Yeah, Bobby, I'm glad I
JD.
let you go first because he had a lot of similar points that I wanted to really emphasize. One of the things I will just say is, we have some very large deployments, right? If you look at what's going on in Georgia, Utah, Texas, and those didn't come like overnight, right? A lot of those entities started small, and have grown and learned through some of those experiences. So I would just say don't be afraid to start. There's a lot of expertise out there that you can learn from a lot of folks. A single intersection here, leads into hundreds of intersections if it once you kind of get going. So that's just one thing I'd emphasize. There's a lot of great groups. So I would say get involved, right? We have our Accelerating V2X cohort. There's the V2X Pool Fund study. There's a lot of great forums to learn from your peers. And what I will say is those folks are more than happy to share. Wyomings of the world, the Utahs of the world, the Georgias, and everybody else who've been doing this for a number of years. Leverage that equipment loan and help desk program. If you just want to get your hands dirty with some of the equipment, get your technicians touching it, reach out to us. More than happy to loan that equipment to you to kind of get started. And I think Bobby's point is excellent too, right? We've got this chicken and the egg thing, kind of going on right now, but what you see a lot of the early deployments are things where you can actually put some of the infrastructure on the vehicle side. So, your fleet vehicles, your buses, your snow plows. The great thing about those is they're making like real world impacts today, providing those benefits. And then I like to always talk about this as like the Swiss Army knife. Like you may put that RSU at the signalized intersection, and right now it may just be supporting things like signal priority and preemption. But that same device can support VRU safety applications, traveler information messages, signal priority, preemption, everything across the board. So that investment, that single investment actually gives you a lot more bang for the buck in the long run. So again, we're more than happy to, any technical assistance we can provide that's out there or put you in contact with folks. But, don't be afraid, start small. I've seen a lot of great things too being advanced in collaboration with a lot of universities and research institutions.
Okay, thanks. Anybody else on that? Okay, one more question for all the panelists. So when it comes to TISMO, which TISMO encompasses quite a bit, what do you see as some of the success factors when it comes to V2X? How are those determined?
More than happy to jump in, Nick, on that. I mean, really the heart of why we're doing all this, right, is the safety benefits. It's the 40,000 individuals killed, right? Number of accidents that are out there. And I think, ITS, V2X, TISMO, safety is certainly critical and paramount to all of that. So anything we can do to address that. And, as I think Bobby kicked it off, getting to vision zero and zero fatalities is critical and important. The way I like to think about it is I think V2X is an extension of a lot of the things, right, that TISMO and ITS have bbeen doing for a number of years. Really, the great benefit that we have is, that connectivity of that information to make things safer. But for doing things, instead of using things like dynamic message signs, to pass messages along, the opportunity to have like geofence, messages directly, from agencies to vehicles without any third parties. I know there's been some scenarios just here in the DC area a number of years ago where things got shut down because of a snowstorm, right? And if you weren't in front of a DMS, it was really hard to tell people to stay away. Well, with V2X technology, I mean, that can be coming straight from an agency to the vehicles themselves. So the ability for that connectivity, I think from the mobility, the messaging standpoint, but also the safety piece of it all. So I think it fits really nicely and just carrying on. And to me, it's the next generation, right, of the technologies. I think the basic themes are there within TISMO. It's just these are new tools that we have in our toolbox to continue to advance this. So
Great, thanks.
And I think JD absolutely hit it on the head when we're looking at the safety aspect of this. NTSB has been asking for these to be in all new vehicles for decades. It's been one of their top requests on their priorities for auto safety. And I think a metrics of success, based on or how I would answer that question is there are all these different crashes, significant loss of life crashes that NTSB has said specifically would have been prevented if these vehicles were equipped with V2X technologies, specifically a stagecoach flipping over in the dead of night, that there was a huge number of secondary crashes related to that, that if these vehicles were equipped, this would have been prevented. I think we need to get to the place as an ecosystem where it is now these are the crashes that were prevented because people were equipped with V2X, and that we know that these benefits are going to be provided primarily in safety, but that it's going to be a whole system of success once we get more of an uptick of deployment of these technologies.
And that's really a great some great advice there, because one of the things that came up at our some of our VDX conversations is when you're looking at safety, is it the number of crashes that these vehicles have, or is it the number of preventable types of situations? And so do you think we'll ever get to a point where that's going to be the new measurement or the new standard on how to measure that this technology is successful, or these vehicles are successful?
Well, I mean, you can see it in terms of data for even in small deployments of this technology, in terms of wrong way driving alerts, for example, the Thea deployment in Florida, that data is going to be available in terms of the message numbers that are sent related to some of these crash avoidance applications and crash avoidance messages. So I do think that once that there is a public and policymaker reluctance, and particularly when you're spending limited transportation dollars on sometimes spending money on things that are going to be bearing fruit over the course of the next couple of years, and less immediate than a pothole filling. But I do think that what this technology lends itself to is providing actionable metrics of success that can show what investment in V2X means for the communities in which it's invested in. So I think that question is likely correct. And I think that that's everybody on this call and in this community of practice goal, is that we can get to a point from a safety perspective where the question isn't how many people died today, it's how many lives were saved by the choices that we made as transportation practitioners.
Right.
Yeah, I think the data shows. I mean, one of the beautiful things, especially the CV pilots, and what we'll be seeing through some of these other deployments, is all that data that's being collected. I mean, BSM's 10 times a second, right? Information from the signals and everything else. You can see when through some of these projects that we've been spearheading over at the ITS JPO, some of the near miss situations where warning was given, right? That's out there. and can be avoided. And I think that's just really telling. There's also really great promise with some of these LiDAR solutions that are out there. I know there's been a lot of great work that's being done in that space. There was an IT conference not too long ago of just using that data, right, and being able to, even if everything's not instrumented, right, being able to see what's going on at an intersection. You could see some of these near misses, but then if you can imagine like that LiDAR picking up everything that's going on at the intersection and then turning even the unequipped into digital messages. That's something that's being done through the sensor data sharing message and then broadcast to vehicles, right? We're at a point where not everything has to be equipped, but those near misses can really be avoided, and better awareness to the drivers. Eventually, this gets integrated into automated vehicles. I will say that the real thing that I would emphasize too with the V2X stuff that we talk about in a lot of our trainings is there's a lot of great sensors and technologies in your vehicles today. Just bought a new car that's out there, cameras, radar sensors and everything else. But the real thing with V2X is, it doesn't rely on the line of sight, right? It can see beyond that vehicle in front of you, two vehicles in front. If there's something that's blocking you, it can see through that. So it really just kind of adds to those other sensors and gets to a point where we're kind of like fail safe or near fail safe with these technologies. So that's the real thing that I think a lot of people are excited about, right? Of just continuing this evolution of all this and how it can help.
Fantastic. Okay. Unless anybody else has anything to add from the panel. Okay, Bobby, Justin, JD, Tom. Excellent presentations. Appreciate all of the information you've shared with our webinar participants today. There'll be more conversation to follow. I've worked out a schedule with Maria that we're going to have some quarterly webinars on V2X, so stay tuned on that. Want to thank everybody for your time today. And avail yourself of all of the resources, whether it's the resources that JD provided or our V2X peer exchange report, or join, one of the groups, whether it's the CAV community of practice or some of the other groups that JD had mentioned. If you're not involved, get involved. So thanks everybody, and hope you have a great rest of the day.